What if I told you over the next few years, your career success and your business growth would depend on how you showed up on camera? Credibility, conversations, careers are now all unfolding in that little rectangle of light. And this new literacy, this sort of ability to speak in pixels, will be as important to us as traditional literacy was to our ancestors. Now, I learned this the hard way. It was ugly. It was in a parking lot, and I was using somebody else's words rather than developing my own. So we're going back a number of years. I was a television news anchor, and I was at my first job, and it was my first day, and I was doing my first live shot, and I was out in the field, and the anchors were back in the studio, and I was covering a mobile blood drive. And it was the holidays, it was November. Blood donations are always down at that time of year, and I was standing in a parking lot next to a mobile blood donation van. And I'm standing there, and I'm listening in my earpiece, and I can hear the anchors beginning the introduction to the story, and they're getting ready to throw it out to me in the field. And this was going to be my big debut. And I hear them say, Kerry Hinkle, right? Hinkle was my maiden name, Kerry Hinkle is joining us now live from the mobile blood donation van out on 344 Kemp Boulevard. And yes, I still remember the address. And then they said to me, it's a very simple question in retrospect. They said, Kerry, how's it going? And in that moment, I forgot every single thing I was going to say. It just evaporated. And I saw the videographer cue me, and I saw the little red light go on the camera, and I stood there with my microphone in silence for what seemed like an eternity. I mean, I was scrambling. And then suddenly, as I was scrambling, I latched onto something in the dark recesses of my brain, and I latched onto it so clearly. And what I latched onto was something that had happened years prior. So before I got this job as a TV news anchor at this little station in Texas, I was an intern at another station in another town in another state. But I was out with a reporter who covered a very similar story. It was a holiday blood donation drive. And somehow in that moment, I remembered exactly what that reporter said. And so I basically said the same thing. I said, well, Doug and Laura, the parking lot is filling up, and there's a line 50 people deep, all getting ready to donate blood and save lives, blah, blah, blah. Right? Amazing save, right? That was an amazing save. Except for one thing. The parking lot was empty. Like empty with a capital E. There was a lone, rusted out Datsun up on blocks in the corner. There might have been a tumbleweed. This was Texas. The line, the alleged line that was 50 people deep, was 0 people deep. I had basically just lied, not intentionally, but I had lied nonetheless to our audience while standing in front of clear visual evidence of that lie. I was mortified. Right now, that was a lot of years ago. And it was back in the time when really the only people who had to be good on camera were TV news anchors and reporters and maybe TV personalities. What I did not know was that at that moment, I was developing skills and I was developing abilities that would eventually become important to most of us. I mean, if you think about the day that we live in now and how business and careers unfold, we are on Zoom calls for client pitches and team meetings, and we're doing video podcasts, and we're doing sales and marketing videos, and we're doing social media videos, and maybe we are on our local news channel, and we're doing a media appearance that positions us as the go-to expert. What I realized in my 20 plus years on air was that the ability to develop camera fluency, the ability to speak in pixels, really lied on three fundamental pillars. Now, it's not enough to know these three pillars academically or theoretically. You do have to practice them in order to become fluent. But I'm going to lay out what those three fundamental pillars are for you. So the first pillar is to know your outs. And in life, just as in front of a camera or on a stage, an out is how you gracefully get out of a situation when things go wrong or when things go sideways, and they always do, right? Things have already gone sideways for me up here in the last couple of minutes. So what I did was I started practicing reset phrases, simple things that I could say that would allow me to gracefully bow out of a moment. So things like, let me say this in another way, which, yes, sounds very simple, but in the moment when the stakes feel very high, it was nice to have a couple of these lines in my back pocket that I could pull out and deploy when I needed to. Another example came when I was interviewing a guest and he started spouting conspiracy theories rather than talking about the event that he was actually there to promote. And so in that moment, which might have thrown me for a loop a few years prior, I said, fascinating, because it kind of was, but let's talk about the event that we're actually here to promote so our viewers have the information. When my teleprompter went down during major live breaking news coverage and I was flying without a net, I was jumping without a parachute, what I said in that moment was, we're having some technical issues, let me tell you what I'm seeing. And in those moments, the confidence was built, not because I was perfect, because I certainly was not, but the confidence was built knowing that whatever hole I found myself in, whether I had put myself there unintentionally or technology had put me there, I could dig my way out and I could navigate to the other side. So that's the first pillar. The first pillar is know your outs. The second pillar is trust your tools. Now, trust your tools does not necessarily mean your lighting and your camera and I'm glad I have those today, but it's not your lighting, it's not your camera, it's not your internet connection, it's not your webcam, it's the tools of your delivery. Things like vocal variety and body language and energy and facial expressions. And I used to practice all of that stuff in the mirror, and I would look for vocal variety and I would check out my energy. Do I look like I'm sedated? Do I seem like I'm interested? What is my face doing? How am I showing up? And I would watch the air checks of the news programs as well. The air check is this recording really of the broadcast, and I would study my delivery there. And then when webcams and smartphones became a thing, I would practice in front of them as well. And I would look for those moments that allowed me to shine. And where the breakthrough was here was when I was interviewing a CEO, and I realized that I was able to put all these tools sort of on the back burner. I was using them on autopilot. And what it allowed me to do was to connect with my interviewee. And when I could connect with my interviewee, I was better able to connect with the audience as well. So pillar number 2 is to trust your tools. Pillar number 3 is find your voice. And this was probably the hardest one for me to learn because it pushed back against everything that I thought, and frankly, probably most of us think, that professionalism means. We think it means that we show up as this sort of slick, polished version of ourselves that we think everybody else wants to see. And it meant that I put on my TV newscaster voice and I sounded like every other reporter. I realized, though, that it was preventing me from actually connecting with my audience, with the people who were watching, with the people who needed the information, with the people I was interviewing, for that matter, as well. And so I started to lead with the things that made me me. Right? In today's day and age, we'd call it authenticity. We didn't use that word so much 20 years ago. Now it's everywhere, right? But that's what it was. It was leading with curiosity. It was leading with empathy. It meant leading with humor sometimes. It meant every now and then letting my Jersey accent out, no matter where I was reporting from. And the breakthrough here came when I was doing a series on a local Air Force squadron, and their airmen and women were getting ready to deploy to Iraq. And instead of keeping that distance, I allowed myself to interview them with questions from my own heart, right? Questions that mattered to the community that they lived in, that they were members of. And the result of that was an amazing series that allowed these families to express their lived experience and allowed people who hadn't had that experience to understand where they were coming from. So the 3 pillars are know your outs, trust your tools, and find your voice. And remember that these skills are not built in a day, and it's not enough, once again, to know them academically or to know them intellectually. You do have to practice until they become instinctive. But practice is what took me from that terrified reporter out in the empty parking lot, clearly lying, to an Emmy and Telly award-winning news anchor right here in New York City. And so knowing your tools, knowing your outs, and finding your voice is key, right? Because in today's era, the people who get seen, the people who get heard, and the people who get trusted are those who understand camera fluency. They understand how to speak in pixels. With that, I would tell you to develop your own fluency, one practice session at a time.